George Spinner, Skateboard George. I always referred to him as Skate or Die Man because I was obsessed with the Nintendo game back in the day, and he looked like one of those characters, like, you know, you would play in like the joust mode in like the half pipe, trying to knock each other off the skateboard. So he was always Skate or Die Man to me. So when my first interaction with George was a Little League game, and I remember I was in the dugout and I just heard this yelling, and it startled me. So like I popped my head out and I saw him, like, you know, the knee pads, the skateboard. He even had like the bandage over his eye at that time. And I asked my mom, I'm like, why is he yelling? Like, this guy gets to cuss in public, like, so cool. Like, how could I do that without like getting grounded or what have you? And it was just outbursts throughout the whole game, and like after a couple times of being startled, like it just kind of like became background noise. That was the first interaction, was the baseball game and the outbursts, and just being like fascinated, like mesmerized, transfixed. I'm like, who is this guy? I thought he was like the coolest thing.
So back in 2012, I was the City Hall reporter for the Reno Gazette-Journal, and part of my beat at the time was writing this blog called the Reno Memo. And it was just kind of a place for me to put stories about not just local politics, but, you know, local characters, kind of Reno culture. And Skateboard George was one of those characters that if you lived here at the time, you just knew about him. He was a visually striking individual, but also kind of a well-known person who would frequent this place called New York Pizza on the corner of Moana and Kitski. It was this kind of 80s vibed, dingy pizza place. This was the day they had recently locked the doors on the pizza place, and I was driving by, and just by pure coincidence, I saw Skateboard George trying to open the doors. And so I just turned around and just stopped by and said, Skateboard George, do you mind if I take your photo? And he agreed. When the Reno Gazette-Journal wrote about Skateboard George, and of course he died in 2014, and my old colleague Sue Skarupa wrote the obit about Skateboard George and his passing, and people just, I mean, it was just kind of this natural response that people chimed in that they had all these memories of Skateboard George.
Well, I went into work that morning, and my editor came up to me and said, Skateboard George died. And I said, who? And so what? And she proceeded to tell me about Skateboard George. And not knowing anything about him, it was kind of, I felt a little bit off kilter, but the first place I called, of course, was New York Pizza, where he hung out. People were a little put off by him because he had Tourette's syndrome, and that, I think that tended not to turn people off, but to maybe be a little standoffish. But from what I understand, he was quite comfortable talking to people and liked to talk to people. They were thrilled to talk about Skateboard George.
He would come and he would shoot the shit with us. Most of the time, he got a meatball sandwich. He was an abnormal dude in a normal world, and he was trying to adjust. And he did his best to adjust to it. I can't imagine his life. I can't. Because, I mean, fuck, if I had Tourette's, I wish I was as cool as George.
Well, I interviewed his caretaker on the phone, and he gave me a lot of the basics for the story. Jeff, his caretaker, was quite open about everything that he could tell me, which was good.
I first met him. It was at Smith's Food and Drug, which was at the corner of Virginia and Moana, and I worked in the pharmacy there. I'm a pharmacist. You know, when he first came in, he'd have an outburst. And you know, people would go, oh, how can you let this guy in the store? And people really looked down on him. My job is to help him, fill prescriptions for him, and I'm just nice to him because I saw everything that was wrong with him.
And at that time, those years, they did not give the pharmacist a dinner break. So they would literally have to stay in the pharmacy. And George heard about this, and he would say to Jeff, you want me to go get you a hamburger from Wendy's? You want an Arby's? I'll go get it for you.
So as time went on, he started doing that.
And I think it was because George recognized that you were okay with him.
Yeah.
That you were okay with all of his his different things. I think if you looked at the pictures, he's wearing elbow pads and knee pads. It wasn't just because of the skateboard. He would inadvertently, because of the Tourette's, slam his body into things and injure him, especially his elbows,
kicks or
his knees.
Elbow.
And
Yeah.
he had injured his eye many years before, so he wore a eye patch over one eye to protect it.
At the end with me is when we knew George was coming to the end, picking a casket for him, bringing him in, and he realized he was going to be dying soon.
I was here and I was taking photos at a funeral for Skateboard George. The one photo that I remember making was of a woman that obviously knew Skateboard George, and she was using a skateboard as a shovel to kind of like put some dirt onto his grave after they lowered his casket into the ground. I do feel like funerals are a great way to actually learn about someone or what kind of person they were. There was a fair number of people that turned out, and a lot of people spoke. So that told me that, you know, people cared about this person.
I mean, Skateboard George is sort of like this character that is also very Reno in its own nature, that Reno is pretty rough around the edges, and I think we've taken there's a lot of pride in our city of being grittier or not as polished. Why would a character like Skateboard George actually, why would people glob onto him? And I think, maybe there's a level of people see him as, we shouldn't judge and just accept people for who they are. Just let the man eat and let him carry his skateboard, and that's cool.
To use the term punk rock, that's what George was. Is I think he embodied everything at a certain point we wanted to be. The man didn't care. He didn't have any ties. And he just had a freedom that I think a lot of us will never experience. And if we did earlier on at a certain point in our lives, we took it for granted. George was he was truly what I think we all wanted to be, truly free. He's what I wanted to be. I'm 45 years old now with a job, and I hate it. I'd love to be kicking a skateboard around, up and down South Virginia and screaming curse words into the air and stuff like that. If I could trade places, I would.
In the end, I think George was a realist. He knew how things were. He knew how his life was. If anything we take away from having met George is get on with it. That's what George did. If George sat and thought about what he didn't have in his life, I don't think it would have lasted very long. His personality was, it is what it is. Get on with it. Go do what you want to do.
Every day he'd be out. He wouldn't stay in his apartment.
No, he wouldn't stay. Unless there was wrestling on.
Well,
Then he would stay.
He loved wrestling.